when I reflect on my life, I've always been an artist. It's always been there, but I can really recognise how other people would maybe feel that comparison or that judgment or like that educational Western standard of what good art is. Sometimes people aren't expressing themselves, their true selves. Anybody can benefit from having a space to create. It's essentially helping somebody to be their best version and feel good, feel better, be able to express themselves more.
Hey guys, it's Dean from I&I Insight, and I'm excited to introduce another episode of I&I Interviews, the video interview series in which I&I interview inspiring individuals who are looking to create positive change in the world through their work. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome Lesley Andrew. Lesley is a fantastic artist, art therapist and creative coach, and we'll be discussing all things creativity as well as some tips for other people on a creative and business journey. I hope you enjoy this interview. So Lesley, welcome to I&I Interviews. How are you doing today, first of all?
Good, thanks for having me. It's a lovely space and really nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise, lovely to have you. So I'd love to start from the beginning, if we can. If you could tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your childhood. Were you always such a creative person, and what was your kind of relationship with art growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question because actually I'd say yes, like that my creativity's always been there. I've always, like even from such an early age, I'd watch TV programmes and I'd be inspired to make the thing, like whether it's out of a pipe cleaner or a paper bag or something, and sticking things together, collaging and making things. And I'm the youngest of 3 siblings, and so like my brother and sister are both, they're maybe not as creative as me, but they would be doing some things, but I would always be the one that would be like doing art. And like I remember winning a competition when I was about 6 years old.
Nice.
And it was I think it was a collage of a train, and it was on display in a little gallery in Horsforth. So like I'm from Leeds originally, so it was like, and even though I've moved away, I've tended to come back to Leeds. So it was really nice to see that as myself as an artist at 6 years old, and then allowing that to sort of nurture as I've gone into school. And I've not necessarily been the best at making art by sort of educational standards. However, I've always loved it, always really enjoyed it, and gone through a natural sort of art course studying. I studied textiles as a degree, and yeah, it's just kind of gone from there. It's always been part of. Somebody once described me as bleeding paint, like arts kind of runs through my veins, and it was, yeah, you're onto something there.
Wow, bleeding paint, that's a very vivid description.
It's quite kind of powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that you had that kind of positive reinforcement, having that early experience of your art being appreciated. I find that that's often the case with people's interests and passions, that, you know, if you get that encouragement from an early age, then it's like, oh, I'm actually good at this, and you're more likely to kind of pursue it. In the rest of your kind of school and education, to what extent do you feel like that kind of helped to nurture your creativity, or did it ever hinder it at all?
I think there's been sort of ups and downs. In school, I did GCSE art, did A-level art, went to college, all of those things. And actually, I think there was something there where I would do it and I would be doing it, but I think there was something at the back of my mind that thought that I wasn't very good particularly, that there was a comparison to other people in my class. And at the time, we're talking sort of mid-90s, I remember there being the message of, you can't really be an artist unless you're sort of the next Michelangelo. I think that's something I remember being said. And but then at the same time, there would be that message of, there aren't any mistakes, just happy accidents, like sort of Bob Ross quote. So there was that sense of having that encouragement to do something artistic, do something with the art, do something creative, and that in turn led me more towards being an art teacher as opposed to an artist. However, I've always, like, when I reflect on my life, I've always been an artist. It's always been there. But I can really recognise how other people would maybe feel that comparison or that judgment or like that educational Western standard of what good art is, and maybe it stopped them making art as they're becoming an adult. And it makes me really sad to think that a lot of people might not have made anything since they were in school, but I felt that as well, and I felt like, oh, am I good enough? I'm doing this, and I would just make more art. Just if in doubt, make more art.
And you mentioned those kind of two sides there. One that's telling you have to be Michelangelo, and one that says it's okay, go ahead, there's no mistakes. Was that from kind of different teachers, different people, or different kind of perspectives that you had? Where did those two sides come from, and how did you move to a position where I'm assuming you're on the more easygoing side of that now?
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure. I think the happy accident thing, I definitely remember that from school, even probably secondary school. But then I think I'm not sure whether the idea about whether being good enough as an artist, I think it was, I don't know whether that came from school or came from like a societal expectation, whether it was anything family might have said, I'm not sure. It could have been a school thing as well, maybe a bit of a mixture. And I think at the time there was maybe the message of maybe something about uni as well. My degree was textiles and it was a design degree, and there were lots of conversations about the differences, I suppose, between art and design and craft, art, design, creativity. What's fine art compared to design? And I'd be making like big kind of one-off canvases, like tapestries, that were more fine art based. However, my degree then was design. So there was lots of contradictions, I suppose, of where do you, maybe that middle ground, navigating that middle, walking that middle path. And I think that's something that fits with you've got to be perfect to make a living out of your art. That's the difference. And I think maybe subconsciously that's what then led me into being an art teacher and later on an art therapist. It's kind of doing those jobs that are using art to help other people. And then when you look within, it's kind of, oh, it's me as an artist.
So could you tell us a little bit more about those jobs? How long were you an art teacher? What was that like? And how did you become an art therapist?
So I've often thought things come round in circles, experiences overlap, and inspiration can come at a time, and clarity of what you want to do can come at the most unusual times. So after I finished uni, this is where I start feeling really old, because that was in 2000. Like, woo!
So this century.
Some people weren't even born then. I had some travel in Nepal, and we were doing voluntary work, working to help build a school and doing some conservation projects as well. And I actually did like my first ever sort of art lesson there. And it was, I think people were drawing animals. I think it was to do with animals on nature. And somebody was saying, well, why don't you be an art teacher? And we were also playing games that, at the time I was a brownie leader. So we were playing games with the children of the village. And like there's a game that we played in brownies called Duck, Duck, Goose. So you might know it.
I know that one, yeah.
It's Duck, Duck, Duck. And we, instead of saying that, we had like the Nepalese for like mosquito and leech. So we were going lamb kote, juga, and you ran round. And it was just that kind of sense of, I need to be doing something with people, and then the art comes in. And I had a year of working in a school, and then that's when I trained to be a teacher. And for a long time, it was really, I did love being a teacher for a long time until I didn't. And I suppose it's what I always loved is just like helping people to be able to create something and like work on their skills. And I suppose I wanted to be an art teacher that was different to the art teachers that I had, like much more flexible, much more open-minded to like taking away that sense of perfectionism. So, and I suppose part of that was about like helping people to come up with their own ideas. So the older students, like when I was working with a student, maybe a sixth former, where whenever I'd have ideas myself, I'd be out and about myself, and I'm like, oh, that could be a really good idea for such and such a student who's looking at landscapes, for instance, a sunset or something like that. Or, oh, that could be inspiration for them. And yeah, it was good for a long time. And I was a teacher for about 11 years, like across that whole period of time. And sometimes students would say, sort of, what sort of career can I do? I'm doing art, I'm doing this, doing that. And some that were doing art and psychology, I got to a point where I was saying, why don't you do art therapy? And there was such a long time in me saying to other people, why don't you do art therapy? And then the penny dropped of, why don't you do art therapy? And it just felt like I wanted to shift towards art therapy, like as kind of a North Star, really. I cared more about, like, this is very much what was going on. I cared more about what was happening for the young people than about what grades they got at their GCSEs. And that was much more kind of apparent. So, and as well, I was like experiencing some health issues where making some of my own art was really useful, really needed. And there were times when I was a teacher when I was really noticing that I wasn't making much of my own art, and times when I was like, I'd make art as an example for a student, but not necessarily for me. And there's a big difference with that. So yeah, that's the shift. And I've been an art therapist for, well, when did I do? I retrained in 2013. So it's been the same sort of amount of time, equal amounts of time, teacher and therapist.
And that's on a self-employed basis, is that right?
So
as an art therapist?
In different ways across the years, I've worked in the NHS, I've worked like in communities as well as in like hospitals and different settings, hospices, and then as well like, and some freelance work with organisations, and some work where I'm like offering my services separately, particularly sort of online things and courses and groups which I deliver now, as well as one-to-one services. So I suppose I would say that it's much more flexible, being able to do it sort of from my own space, from my own, as a self-employed business owner. So combining sort of confidence coaching with art therapy is essentially mixing different therapeutic approaches and different ways of working with people to meet their individual needs. So historically, I've leaned in and out of different therapeutic tools. There's so many different models out there, so many different things that you can maybe align with. But essentially, it's about helping people to get to know themselves, get to know, like, be able to think about kind of be more self-aware, work through emotions, process experiences, and step through as a more sort of empowered version of themselves. Whatever label it is that we call it, whether we call it art therapy, whether we call it coaching, whether we call it like some of it's sort of CBT informed, whatever it is that we do, it's essentially helping somebody to be their best version and feel good, feel better, be able to express themselves more, like in a happier way.
Great, fantastic. So yeah, I was going to ask a bit more about what art therapy itself is. You've kind of started to explain that there, but yeah, I suppose art therapy might be something that some people may or may not have heard of.
Yeah.
To what extent is art therapy used in the NHS? What can it be used for? Is it people who have, you know, particular mental health or other challenges, or is it something that can help different people in different ways?
So art therapy, I'm really glad you asked, because actually there's lots of misunderstandings, I suppose, about art therapy, because art can be therapeutic. It can and is absolutely therapeutic in its own right. So the profession of art, of being an art therapist or an art psychotherapist, those words can be transferable. It's a protected title based on the registration with the HCPC, which is Healthcare Professionals Council, and having like the training. So in different parts of the world, there's different levels of training and expectations, things that you've got to achieve. In the UK, it's a master's. So I went to Derby Uni to study my master's, and what I like really loved about that kind of training, and also found hard, was it really gets you to look within. So actually there's so many different things, so many different people that can benefit from having art therapy as a space. And in a nutshell, we're using the creative and the images, the creative process and the images as a way of communicating, self-expression, processing, and navigating through sort of mental health challenges. It's a mental health profession in itself. So actually, whether it's a diagnosable mental health condition, or like there's lots of things about diagnosis that you could discuss, but it's maybe like we can look at like really kind of people's challenges. I suppose I would maybe lean into, rather than specific conditions, because actually anybody can benefit from having a space to create. Yeah, it's a really good way of expressing something that words just can't. Sometimes it can be that we might not be able to find the words. Sometimes it might be that the words and the experience is painful to talk about. Sometimes it might be that there's certain things that you wanting to express but maybe get out, like cathartically express, but might not have the words for. So there's a whole range of kind of reasons why somebody might use art therapy. And having that person, that therapist to work with is significantly different to maybe just like sitting and making a piece of art that can be therapeutic in itself, but it's that witnessing and that's that holding space, which is huge.
Beautiful. Could you give an example maybe of a person that you've worked with, obviously without naming names, but maybe just a description of something that stood out for you in your career, somebody that you've helped with a particular challenge, and how art therapy was able to help them?
Yeah, I mean there's different ways that people use art when they come to an art therapy session. Sometimes people have that expectation that their art has to look good, and they might be unsure about where to start, thinking, well, I'm not very good at art, what do I do? And actually there's that, like I would give that message of, well, it's less about what the picture looks like and more about like you playing with the art materials and exploring and expressing something from within, and there isn't that interpretation so much. So then sometimes people will maybe question what they're doing, and like being given permission to play is the main thing. So we might start off playing around with materials. A lot of the people that seem to, on the surface, be doing art therapy the most are maybe the ones that are like making embodied images. So we've got that real embodiment of what's going on, some of those emotions. So on the surface, it could look like that, oh, we're really expressing something. But then other people might be more sort of creating a diagram of something, or symbols and sort of metaphors, or like emoji pictures, or maybe using objects as well. I use a lot of objects with people. Yeah. There's somebody that I've been working with recently who's really embraced the sort of the fluidity of the paint. So sometimes people can be really cautious about painting because it's maybe unpredictable. So using chalk or using like paint that's fluid can be like very smudgy chalk or very fluidy paint can be very different for somebody than using maybe a felt tip pen or a pencil that's perhaps a bit more predictable. So actually being able to navigate through that and go, oh, that paint's dripped a little bit beyond what I'm wanting. How can I tolerate the frustration of this? And by sort of tolerating that frustration, is it something that I need to maybe just tweak in my artwork? Do I need to like paint over this bit, or do I maybe problem solve something? Or is it something that I can leave as it is, that I can tolerate as it is? And some people go the extreme where they're just like covering everything with paint and it's just very, very messy, and actually that can feel really a real relief sort of thing. Yeah. And I suppose as an art therapist, being in that space with somebody who is leaning in and out of like times when they're expressing something, maybe emotions might come up that they might not be talked about. My role is then to hold that space for someone and guide them towards something. So when I've worked with people who have been quite cautious about what they're using, they've maybe put on a pair of gloves because they've not liked how the chalks felt. Something has stopped them touching the chalks otherwise, whereas wearing a pair of gloves has then enabled them to use the chalk to express themselves. And that's me facilitating that knowing, or kind of talking with them about what might be useful. And in the same sort of way, someone that's really maybe creating some mess, their art feels messy and feels like it might be overflowing on the table, like really spread out. My role would be then to sort of tolerate that, also provide that containment. So there's real subtleties of how much paint dripping can we cope with, and how much, like I can cope with this, I can tolerate this, I can sit with this. However, actually it's looking to see how much they can tolerate. At what point do we get all the paper towels out, and at what point? There's lots of nuances within that. And I've just, in these last few minutes, just talking through different ways that it can show up. So there's no wrong way of maybe using those materials, but then there's a subtlety about, does it go too far or not far enough? How far can I push it? before it feels unsafe? Or how can I push it a bit further? This is the client, can I push it a bit further? And will I survive it going beyond the plan sort of thing? Try not to say go wrong, sort of it didn't go according to plan.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard that explanation of art therapy before, and I find that really interesting. How a lot of the questions that come up during that process that you mentioned there about does it need to be a certain way? Can I really express myself? Is this okay? Is this too much? Etc. Those are the kinds of questions that people often have about their lives and themselves and their personality, and trying to kind of control things or fit into society's boxes, and thinking back to what you said about those different perspectives, even as a child in school, thinking, okay, you have to be Michelangelo, or oh, actually it's okay, you can make happy accidents. It sounds like those questions that come up within the art therapy are almost serve as reflections for people about their own lives, whether even they know it or not. And then they're almost, by processing those questions within the context of this art therapy expression, then they're actually learning how to process these things in their day-to-day life. Is that kind of how it works?
Oh yeah, I feel a bit like there's very much that parallel to personal experiences and beliefs about themselves, that am I too much, am I not enough, am I too loud, am I too quiet, am I like, and a lot of this is about judgments, how they think other people see them, or versus how they see themselves, and where they navigate and where they want to be. And often I talk about the art therapy being that messy middle, that middle ground, that messy middle of we're not there, we're somewhere in the middle, and we're not actually in the middle, we're leaning backwards and forwards. So it can feel like it can feel like a dance, maybe leaning in and out of things. And does today feel safe enough to do something like that, or to do something different? Or is today maybe a day to do something that feels familiar? And I think that they're quite common in life. So when I was saying about the dripping paint and tolerating that anxiety of the paint dripping, it's kind of, okay, well, if I can tolerate my art not going to plan, or I've made a piece of art that is intentionally without a plan, what would it be like to step into the world and do something, go to a new place, for instance, meet some new people? Can I go to a new place with people that are familiar, that I know, or would I meet new people in a familiar place? And that's maybe how people can then think, well, if I can do that in my art, I can take the next step in my life. Or, nothing's bad happened from painting the sky, like, I don't know, yellow or something.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. It sounds amazing. So simple in a way, but really valuable, to allow people to reflect and express themselves in that way where maybe they haven't been able to, and that's often the case in life, and why people find themselves in challenging emotional situations, because they haven't necessarily expressed themselves properly. So that's a vehicle in which they can do that.
Yeah, I think that's true, isn't it? That sometimes people aren't expressing themselves, their true selves, and how they're wanting to, what they really believe in and what they really think, even small things. However, they might be expressing what they think that they should be expressing, like saying what they think the answer should be. And I mean, like something looping back to like when I was a child, my parents divorced when I keep thinking I was 6, but I think I was maybe about 9. And so actually as a child, there would have been times when I was maybe a bit torn as divided loyalties and not sure how I should be. And that would have maybe affected me subconsciously. And I think I was probably quite quiet as a child and quite shy as a child. And I think on reflection, it's maybe that I was trying to please and trying to sort of please people who had opposing kind of expectations, which is challenging for a lot of the children that I've worked with over the years. Sometimes they've experienced early life challenges and adversity. Sometimes it's been that they're no longer living in the birth family, so actually their experiences are very different, and they're having to work out what's expected and how they can be, which can be really tricky.
Yeah, and I resonate with that as well. Being from a family where my parents separated, and being kind of effectively kind of taken to be on one side against the other, and having to kind of defend that side and demonize the other side as a child. And you know, as children, we're so impressionable and we want to fit in, and I think it's just instinctive, isn't it, to want to fit in. And yeah, like you say, I think that does persist through adulthood a lot of the times, that, you know, a lot of us are still tempted to fit in the box and find it difficult to paint outside the lines, as they would say. So yeah, I can see it's really valuable what you're offering in that regard. So I wanted to ask you then about creativity coaching. I believe is another arm or strand of what you do. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So when I think about creativity coaching, I see this as a way of helping people to sort of unleash their creativity. And I would call myself sort of a creativity/confidence coach, that using creativity to boost confidence, to be able to sort of help people to be more confident versions of themselves. And essentially, there's so many myths about creativity that is separate from art therapy, because it is more about channeling the creativity and tapping into it. So and that's where the sort of two levels come in. So a lot of people kind of feel a bit like, oh, I'm just not a creative person. I don't have a creative bone in my body, and it's not possible for me to do this, to be creative. And part of that myth is that creativity is purely about art, crafts, and I mean, it's possible to make a craft without particularly being creative, and it's possible to be creative without doing art. So a lot of what I do with that is help people to be able to feel a bit more confident in their creativity, and to use creativity to work through their own challenges in the sort of coaching way, which feels quite different to therapy. So yeah, sometimes people have said that they're just not a creative person, and I found myself saying some of the same things but the opposite way around. I'd say things, oh, I'm an artist, I'm not very logical. So part of what I'm striving to be modelling and doing more is more the logical, rational thinking, to break away from this, you're either logical or creative. It's not a polarity, we can do it all. So, and just leaning in and out of those things.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree with that entirely. And yeah, again, coming back to school, I think there is a tendency, from my perspective at least, that you know, our schooling, our education, our upbringing, maybe our parents can lead us to go into one box or another. For me, I always did quite well in school academically, and I was kind of put off, at least in my experience, like physical activities and like sport and things like that, because I always thought that, you were either smart or you were
Yeah.
physical. And similarly, some people think, I'm very smart or logical or I'm creative. But I think the truth is that we all have all of those potentials within us. And ideally, to become more well-rounded people, we need to try to cultivate and level up all these different
Yeah.
skills as we can. So it's great that you're encouraging people who maybe don't see themselves as being creative that they are. What kinds of do you have any kind of initial tips or initial bits of information or
Yeah.
advice that you give to people who are maybe in that boat where they think, I'm not really creative? Like, how can they discover that?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways to, it's easy enough for me to say, just start. Easy to say, just start, because a lot of it is about starting. It's about a mindset of having a bit of a growth mindset where you believe that new things are possible, to try some new things. And so actually doing some doodling, doing some like scribbling and starting like that can be a good way of making something that is more about the movement and more about the, a self-care, a self-development practice, rather than making something with the intention of it going on the wall sort of thing. So actually there's maybe something about lowering the bar, getting the lowest hanging fruit as to what you can do, which if that's a scribble, then that's a good way of starting. I see a lot of people who don't think that they're creative, however, their photography skills are like through the roof. They're on the phone, they can take photos, they'll zoom in, and they're very aware of their surroundings. So that's something that I would really encourage people to do, and to look at maybe the ordinary and create something that's quite extraordinary from that. So you can have, I don't know, like a bottle of water or something, or a kettle or a mug or something, and take a photograph of it from a different angle, or go on a walk and take photos of the weeds, and like, who's to say that's a weed anyway, but like take photos of the cracks in the wall and things like that, that's tuning your eye into something different. And you might even then go home and draw it, or it might be that some words come to your head. It might be listening to some music might inspire you something. And yeah, it's very much about getting started and managing your expectations, that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to do something that maybe combine something together. I was going to say something else about, I was going to say something else, but my brain just went. But yeah, it's just something about being able to allow what to happen.
Yeah. And that seems to be, the recurring thing again, like we're saying, even with the art therapy and, again, creativity, art, expression, these words are all kind of synonymous, and encouraging people that it's okay to be as they are and express as they are.
Yeah.
So that's another modality in which you're doing that, which is great.
Yeah, and what you said about being in school and not doing the sporty stuff, and it's like academic or sporty, it's like either or. Actually, there's something really helpful about embracing that beginner's mindset of doing anything, like having a go at doing something and doing it for fun, or doing it just to have a go, even if it's a bit like going, and me and my sister did karaoke at the beginning of the year, and neither of us are brilliant singers. However, we did it and we enjoyed it, and actually we weren't doing it with the intention to then get a #1 record. We were just doing it. So the same can apply with going and going for a walk or something. We're going for a walk. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna gonna go for a little jog. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna win the Olympics. But I can still do it, or I can still strive to improve for myself. It's not all or nothing.
Definitely, that's great. I've heard you have a podcast, which I've listened to a few episodes of, and I think, is it your kind of general brand and or philosophy, A New Pace?
A New Pace.
Which is an acronym, I believe, if you could break that down for
Yeah,
us.
I can talk about this. So A New Pace, and the PACE word stands for pause, act, create, empower. There's a lot of acronyms for PACE in the therapy world, to be fair. And the way that I've kind of seen this, it isn't just about the pace, but it's about stepping into a new pace when there's been transitional events happen, when there's been, challenges go on. It could be a bereavement, it could be a change of job, it could be a health issue, it could be all sorts of things. And actually choosing to take time to pause, depending on what act looks like, taking action, and then obviously, like, I'm going to bring some creativity into it, but it's doing those sorts of steps at times when you're maybe needing to navigate life a little bit differently and choose to step into a new pace. And for me, I had an operation last February, and part of that, a lot of that's kind of I've been navigating through that myself using pace. So having to take time to pause and like recover from my operation. That prior to it, there was a lot of illness. There was a lot of having to slow down. So I was doing a lot of hiking and running before, and really being forced to pause maybe. And then there's maybe a difference between being forced to pause or forced to stop and choosing to pause bit by bit. And so actually when it comes to encouraging people to, say, like navigating perimenopause, for instance, is a good example, where like one of the big things with perimenopause is suddenly like the psychological impact of sort of estrogen levels changing, lots and lots of things going on in your body that can feel a bit strange, feel a bit uncertain. It's very easy to then question things. So being able to actually be more mindful, which is part of that pause, be able to take action in a way that feels aligned, but then not necessarily, it not needing to be a big thing. Could be the very smallest things can make a big difference. Just walking around the block can feel like climbing a mountain if you're struggling with something. So within the podcast, I started to have guests, which has been good because it means more sort of richer conversations, and some people have been like working the wellbeing arena themselves, some people more personal trainers, and so actually it's what it makes me think about is maybe it's quite open for lots of people. It's very different from pure art therapy. It does feel like I liked how you talked about it as a philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think from a few podcasts that I've seen, I think I've seen you and your guests relate that philosophy of pause, act, create, empower to kind of different modalities, different lines of work, and I think that is valid. That applies to different things, and also, as you were saying earlier, like there's connections between art, creativity, and other modalities as well. I think in most, if not all, lines of work, to be really successful or to do something that's different and valuable does generally require some creativity, and maybe taking that pause, act, create, empower to actually do something new. A new pace.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? And I think sometimes it can feel like it's new, but also it can, like, you might be returning to the things that you once did. So I've been talking a lot about sort of the midlife art era of people, like, talk about having a midlife crisis. It's like, well, if you use your midlife crisis to be creative, to make some art, then you're leaning into something. Not only are you doing something that's maybe a new hobby, a new expanding your world and making your life bigger, but you're also expressing yourself and like regulating emotions with the style of art that you're making, depending on whether you need to be sort of activated, if you're feeling a bit flat, or whether you maybe need to do something that feels calming. So I think that feels really, that there's an importance of knowing where you're at with that.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode of I&I Interviews so far. If you are and you'd like to continue to watch, I'd ask you just one small favour. Go to my website, go to iandinsight.com/community, join my I&I community mailing list, and you'll get immediate access to the second part of this video. Here's a glimpse of what's still to come.
Navigating what the true self is can be really challenging, and what authentic means can be different for everyone and different every day. How can you be authentic and strive for more? And I realised that I was grieving and I was going through something. I was needing to step into a new place myself. I'm wanting to create a space for people to be able to feel that they can talk about their experiences, be the change you want to see in the world, sort of thing. And actually, if there's a service that you would have liked that didn't exist, then create it.